What's up, YouTube and everywhere listening? It's your main man, AB the Hero. We are back for the first time, the first ever episode of the Future of Sports podcast with your main man, AB the Hero. And on this podcast, we talk to former athletes and now professionals about their transition from being an athlete, pro, amateur, whatever it is, into their new career. And then we also talk to people who are working in the sports industry, who can give us some tips and tricks. If you're in any role, if you're somebody who's trying to advise the younger generation on how to move throughout their sports journey, we're talking to folks who can give some insights on that. And so in today's episode, the first ever episode, I felt like we needed to have somebody from my own past and who has been a part of the journey that I have made through from being an ex-athlete to what we do now on YouTube and some of the stuff in the ballerverse. You know what I'm saying? I wore this just for this one here. This is one of my colleagues, somebody who back in the JBA days, you'll remember this name, your main man Talking with Fresh, um, who is here with us. Talking with Fresh, we met many moons ago via the social medias. I remember he reached out. I remember the first time I stumbled across your stuff is you had an article that you had read on your old website, which was Fresh Talk Sports. And it was about LeVar being a billionaire or something like that. And they had retweeted it, and I was like, okay, who is this on the scene? And then we reached out and then got in contact. And when the JBA started, my man here pulled up to, I think, a trial in Atlanta and met them. I'll let him get into that whole side of the story. But I'll say that one of the biggest hustlers I know in the sports realm, even from back having that website and then making things move to on our tour, some of the things that happened and occurrences and things that we got to do, and my man being able to slick talk his way into different events and all of that stuff. But that's just my experience with him. He's got so much more experience that we'll get into and talk a little bit about on today's podcast. But and his new book about to drop about the JBA League and all of that jazz. But introducing my man, Talking with Fresh, Brandon Williams. Can you just give the people a brief introduction? Things that I can't mention, but you know what I'm saying, you'll sell it to them how it's supposed to be sold, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But definitely, I appreciate you having me on. I feel definitely honored, humble, that I'm, your first guest on this particular new platform. It's been, I mean, this is a long time. I think the people have been waiting for this for 5 years, man. I feel like you had everybody from the JBA on except for me. Like you had Manny on, you had the intern on, you had Josh, the intern on. Like I'm like, man, how the people couldn't get AB and Fresh, what I'm saying, like reconnection, what I'm saying? But we've had several conversations over the years since the JBA, so definitely not no static on that. But yeah, I think in your introduction you pretty much said the majority of things. I appreciate you just kind of laying it out there like that. Other things that people may not know. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Got 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and a former educator as well, basketball coach, all the above, man. So, I've walked a few things, a few different paths in my life, and sports has always been, a constant ever since I've been a little boy, and it's gonna remain that, especially even in my personal life. But now my kids, my sons, my boys, they like sports, so it's probably going to be something that's going to be a part of me for a lot more years to come.
Dope. And so one of the main things that I want to ask everybody on this platform is about their journey within sports. So probably the majority of this conversation will be about all of the things that you've learned post your playing career or whatnot. But what was your sport of choice growing up? And could you talk about what was maybe your biggest accomplishment or most memorable moment as a youngster playing the game?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. My sport of choice, my very first sport was baseball. Like I just, my dad, He played in like a little semi-pro league when he was in high school. He was really good. So I think that was a sport that he kind of always wanted to introduce to me and my brothers for sure. So I started playing baseball at 5, and I took to it really well. I didn't stick with sports like I knew that I could and needed to. So it's kind of a bittersweet topic because my parents got divorced when I was 6, and some of the when I got older into high school age, I played in middle school, but when I got to high school age, going back, to be with one parent over the summer, and then coming back, with the parent that you were living with, that really took a toll. And better than or know just like a lot of people, the summertime is a premium for athletes. In high school, they expect you to be there regardless of whether it's voluntary or not. If you're playing football, baseball, basketball, whatever, that's the time that they really want to kind of incorporate, some of the off-season, training methods, and they really just want to see who's dedicated, because once the fall comes, it's they don't have as much time. You only get so many weeks to prepare for the actual first game of the season. So, using the summertime is a big part. So, I was always away during the summer, and that really took away from what I was trying to do with being the athlete that I knew I could have been. So my journey was mainly in coaching. I took such a big passion with that because my thing was, I would say the same message to the players in high school when I first started was like, look, y'all don't want to be like me. Y'all don't want to be someone who probably still could have tried out, because I didn't even try out for the sports I was really good at. I didn't try out for basketball or baseball in high school. I said, y'all could be like me and have regrets if you don't take this seriously, or you can really give your all, and who knows what can end up happening. So I kind of took a lot of that and poured a lot of my passion into coaching, and then I got my start into the media industry. Using that same methodology of passion and pouring it into writing and building up other people, and then using that to kind of help build a story. So that was pretty much what my journey was. From to answer your question, to start off, and then kind of where I'm at now.
Ah, that's deep. That's deep, man. I think it's the gift and the curse, right? Because the more time you put into it, the more rewards and things you can reap from that. But you end up being in tough situations when you are playing sports year round like that, or you're required, in order for you to really be successful, it's, can you have the availability to be available around the clock, right? And so when you talk about being away for the summer and how that impacted your ability to, like, you know what I mean, hold your spot on the team or be available in some of the eyes of some of these coaches. And I don't know. I think I'm doing something a little different with my son. Like, he didn't play any sports this summer at all. He's in karate class, but we did some more experiential stuff. And he went to Hawaii, went to Washington, D.C. We took some road trips and just saw some things, trying to, get his mental ready. So when the school year start and all that stuff, we can start building the body and all of that jazz. But that's deep, man. And I appreciate your, I think that one of the big things that I feel like people who don't play sports miss out on is being able to grab these intangibles and then apply them into new careers, And so when you talk about the lessons you learn from sports and able to apply that into coaching and then even into writing and all of that stuff, to me, I think people miss that. That's so valuable. Those intangibles that you can get and use them. So then when you started the writing, what was your first kind of platform, or did you get in with I heard Stephen A say this the other day. He went down the list of all of these like probably to anybody else seemed like really small moments, but to him was like my first interview at the paper. I was writing for Little League. I was writing this. I was writing, and kind of built up to where he was today. What was your trajectory like, and from the writer's aspect? How did you get your first like taste of it, and knew that was a nice transition from being an athlete?
Yeah, for me, like I actually didn't even start talking about sports when I first started writing. I just knew that I wanted to write. I wanted to write about something, and initially it was about like education. You know, like I just remember, like I talked to one of my homeboys. I was like, man, I want to write, man. Like I just want to get whatever's on my mind, whatever's on my heart. I just want to get it out. And you know, he was like, well, you can just start with WordPress. It's just a free blog where you can just, you know, just to start, you know, writing whatever. So it wasn't anything, you know, major. Now I remember my first blog post. It was like my journey into the world of education or something like that, and I just kind of just poured my heart out. And I got like such an overwhelming response from like, you know, my family and friends. They're like, "Man, this you got a really good writing voice. Like I could just feel like, you know, I could feel your words like when you write." That type of situation. So I wrote a few more, probably, you know, a good 10 or 15 more. And then, you know, I was like, man, I really want to like write about something sports related. So, you know, I'm an Alabama alum. And at that time, there was a quarterback battle going on at Alabama with Blake Sims. You know, he was, you know, potentially going to be one of the first, you know, black quarterbacks to start in a long time at Alabama. And you know, so I was like, let me just get my thoughts on this whole Blake Sims situation. So I wrote about it, and I looked at like my data and analytics for like my WordPress, and like they like spiked, and I was like, light bulb moment. You know what I'm saying? Like it just clicked. It's like, yep, Brandon, this is what you need to do. You need to, you know, pin your thoughts on sports. You know, so it kind of went from that. And then, you know, I started my very first like actual legit website, and I called that the Fresh Report. At that point, I was like writing about every single sport. Pretty much, I was writing about baseball, basketball, college football, NBA, NFL. Like I wanted to be like a ESPN or whatever. But there's only one of me, and there's, you know, thousands of stories that seem to go out every day. I was even writing about the World Cup, and I don't even at that point I didn't know nothing about soccer. You know what I'm saying? So, but I just wanted to have a voice in the sports industry. You know, so that's essentially what kind of jump started my journey was, you know, that blog post in WordPress, off just talking about education, and then it just kind of jump started like a whole new phase for me.
That's deep. That's deep. You said early on, like somebody was like, "Yo," you were like, "I just want to write," and then they taught you to blog, how to use WordPress. What would you say is the thing that you kind of learned about yourself in that moment? You know what I'm saying? Like, was there something that I feel like for me and a lot of folks, there's a hurdle to try to do something new, right? There's this thing like, you know, there's something in you that's telling you should do it, and like there's a thing like there's something blocking it, right? But it seemed like you went all the way in on that right away. Can you speak to what would have been pushing you past the potential hurdle that might have been there, or was there not even a hurdle there?
Now there wasn't a hurdle. The only hurdle was me just knowing, you know, what avenue to go into. Like I knew that I wanted to do it. Like I was already, you know, kind of expressive on like Facebook or whatever. Like if I felt, you know, passionate about a subject, you know, I'll write these little long posts sometimes, like kind of expressing my thoughts and opinions on it. You know, and I was always able to kind of put words together. I've always had a gift to do that. So the only hurdle was just trying to figure out, okay, you know, where can I get this if I want more people outside of like my Facebook friends, you know, to kind of hear what I want to say. But what kind of propelled me, kind of what I just mentioned a moment ago, was the response that I got. Like that was like validation. Like, okay, Brandon, like people really do want to hear what you have to say. Because all of us have a voice, but it doesn't mean everybody wants to hear it, or you even know how to put it together. Some people do really well with speaking. Some people do really well with writing. And I feel like, I can travel and cross over to either one, but I feel like, I can really put words on paper and express myself really, really well from a written standpoint, probably better than most people. And when I put that first one together and just seeing how people just gravitated towards it, like, I mean, it was a feeling that I couldn't really describe, and it was like a big rush. I was like, man, like, yeah, Brandon, this is what you need to be doing. You need to find some kind of way to just keep this going. Like, don't stop. You know what I'm saying? So, like, that's what really just drove me, man. Like, I still remember some of the people, some of my friends, some of my family's like, wow, Brandon, like, this was dope. You know what I'm saying? And it just kind of just grew from that.
Through that journey, you talked about a few different platforms that you created and curated and all of that stuff. And so, from watching you in this moment, one of your most recent pieces that you have started to push out into the world is this book about the JBA. And I feel like, from what I can see, is a lot of the response to it or excitement around it is a lot similar to those first pieces of writing for you. Is there what is your thoughts and like kind of what is your initial reaction to some of the responses that you've gotten from people finding out that you're undertaking this journey or sharing that journey from the JBA in a book?
Yeah, man. Like, I know I've used the word like humble, all that. I mean, just I mean, just the process of writing a book, just the ideas is different from writing an article or a blog post or anything like that. Like, you're penning something that you know it's supposed to typically be a long process, and I started it last year. And I had really good headway with it, but then I kind of got stuck. I was like, man, like, I don't even know how I'm gonna finish it. And I just eventually, like, 2 months ago, just kind of like, you know what, lock back in, Brandon, and I just did it, up till 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, just finding inspiration from all sorts of places. But I wanted the story to be told. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to be told from my perspective. I mean, you were a part of it, and you have your own story, and your own perspective. All the colleagues that we had that went through the same journey or similar, they have their own perspective. But I just felt like it needed to be told because you know we look at what leagues are doing nowadays, and whether it's the G League, the overtime elite, and even now with NIL, a lot of the stuff that that we were trying to accomplish, it may not have all came together how we wanted it to, but I believe, and I feel like you probably can feel the same way, that we inspired somebody, something. I mean, somebody looked at it and said, "Hey, man, it could probably be done a little bit better than what they did," but that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And the fact that we were able to do something that nobody really thought that we were able to do, and do it with such every time I say it out loud, it just sounds crazy, like literally doing this with like a month and a half of planning time. Like, that's like, how do you put together an entire league's worth of what you do, then a spinoff, when you really didn't have much time to even plan for it. I thought that was a pretty remarkable thing, that we're all of us that came together to do it. Like, this was a story that was just about me. That's why I called it a league of our own, because it's not just LeVar's league. It's my league. It's your league. It's Brianna's league. It's Alan's league. It's Drea's league. It's everybody who was a part of, especially in that core group of people, and it also extends beyond that to the players and the other people who were part of it as well, that helped us all put it together. All of us have played a major part in seeing through something that may not necessarily get the notoriety that it probably could or should. But we all played a major, and I feel like people need to know. So when I opted and told everybody that this was what I was doing, like, it was the same thing. It was an overwhelming response. People was like, man, that's great. Yes, it's what we needed. Thank you. All types of different words of appreciation. And it just again, validates that this wasn't something that I just did just on a whim. Wasn't something I did in vain. Like it was something that people really appreciate. And hopefully, enough eyeballs get on it, and the story can really get out there to, remind people of all the hard work that we all did.
I agree with you. I think that the story of the JBA is one that I like feel like needs to be told. It needs to like live on, right? I was in Washington D.C. over the weekend. I was looking at all these monuments and these historical figures, and I was really processing through this ideal of like these are folks with checkered past. You know what I'm saying? Like they are people who have led our country to what it is today. But if you really start to get into the scruples of some of the decisions and tactics, very checkered past. But we're not here without them, right? So you can't delete history because checker pass. You know what I'm saying? Like at some point you got to appreciate the accomplishments, and then you also got to learn from some of the checkers in that past, And so I appreciate your telling of this story, because I think of when I try to go back to where we were like in society when it comes to amateurism and sports and development. Like I don't think that we were investing enough into it at the time. And I agree, like this to me inspired some folks to realize that there's an audience for developmental basketball if you curate it right, but then also like there's a talent pool who's ready to kind of access that. I guess from your perspective, can you talk about like what was that need in that moment for the JBA, and like what are some of the outcomes that we've seen from it, whether that's players or that's like some of the mimicking that has happened? Like what do you see has been the through line from that initial moment of we need something to happen here, and then where we at today?
I mean, from my vantage point, and I wasn't really like majoring into the AU scene or anything like that. I had like, fellow coaches, they would ask me, if I wanted to coach a team or a team or whatever the case may be. And I always told them like, that's not really my lane or whatever. But I knew that there was a big deal. And I knew that, at some point, what we're seeing now, it was kind of going to be inevitable. And then, when LeVar had the idea, I was like, here we go again. This is another brilliant, concept. Because I mean, you were the same way. When he first came on board just with the clothing and the shoes and everything, I was like, why is this a normal thing for some of the top athletes, And then it's like, okay, well, you have a basketball league that kind of circumvents or it gives an alternative route if you just want to play sports. Like that's what you want to do. You want to be an athlete. You want to focus on being the best athlete you can be, and you want to be able to be compensated for that. It makes perfect sense, to be able to provide that, and not to feel like you're being penalized if you're not able to sit in the class and give the grade or get the grade that you probably need to, because and I said this the other day. I mean, some people that they're just not capable. Not like they're not smart. It's just some athletes, and I taught a lot of them and coached a lot of them. They have certain learning disabilities like dyslexia that makes it difficult for them to just sit in the class and be taught the way that is traditionally taught. And they're still, a lot of them are still brilliant people, but it's a deterrent for them to be able to learn or something that is not conducive to their learning to be able to sit in the classroom based on their learning disability. So if I'm an athlete and I know this about myself, it's like, well, I do well kinesthetically. I can go out on a football field or a baseball field or a basketball court, and I can pick up that way. But if you put words and numbers and all this stuff in front of me, sometimes they get jumbled up, or I may not be able to understand it based on how you're telling me. But I just want to focus on doing something I'm really, really good at. But if I can't, if I got to sit here and I got to go to a classroom and I got to get a C average in order for me to play, well, I don't know. I may as well just kind of give up. And there might be, who knows how many people that has a cautionary tale like that, because they just could not get through the school part, and they just became discouraged. Who knows? Sports and athletics have been going on for 75 plus years in terms of having a collegiate system like that. Who knows how many people just got discouraged? I mean, who knows if the next LeBron James, Michael Jordan, or whomever was out there, but we just missed them because they couldn't take it no more. I wanted to be a part of that from that standpoint as an educator, because at that point I was still teaching, and I saw so many students and athletes who had to sit out a semester or had to sit out an entire year because they couldn't make the grade. And sometimes it wasn't because of a lack of effort. They had something that was preventing them from being able to be at their best academically. And they were being penalized on something that they were really good at that could really propel them into a career. I was all aboard with LeVar and his concept, and I wanted to be able to see it through. So, I think what we were able to do and to shine a light on that, I think you'll start seeing more sports and more leagues can come about, like kind of how we're seeing with the G League and the Overtime League.
I'll say this. I think for me, like your reasoning there of folks just maybe not the academics and the sports, it's like not making sense for everybody. It makes sense. I also think about it through the context of there are some folks who just like you're talented enough to dive straight in on the sports and like you should be able to do that. So to early on to backtrack into your conversation about like, and it's kind of, I said I'm not a super fan of the year-round athletics thing, you know what I mean, at a young enough age, but I do think in any other form of career, right, you can make a decision that this is my thing, and you can go as hard as you want and be a pro at it immediately. And I think that that's something that was not happening in that moment many moons ago, right? Where you're talented enough where you can make some money from your skill set, but because of this amateurism situation, like we're just not even gonna let you do that. And when you start looking at what's happening in people's home life and some of the things, like it would be really cool if this thing that I'm really good at, I could use to help put food on my mama's table, right? This thing that I'm really good at, if I could have somebody invest in my ability to get better and better, and so I can go and make these hundreds and 200 and 300 million dollars contracts, or maybe even if it's not even going into the NBA, because from what I've seen, and I want to get into it when we start talking about your book, is that there are so many guys who have played in the JBA who like who still play basketball to this day, right? And it might not be $100 million contracts. It might be at the Pro-Am over in St. Louis. It might be Jello who made it to the G League and the Summer League. It might be your boy Nixon with And One and Slam magazine, all of these different things. But I think that for some of these guys, there may be an opportunity. An opportunity might have been missed to even continue to do this without this league being created in that moment. You know what I mean? Like I always chuckle at how many times there's a new league popping up or a new thing going viral on social media, and I'm like, oh shoot, that dude played at the JBA. You know what I mean? And so to me speaks to the caliber of players that we had there, and it just, if we would have had another season or two to be able to develop that and foster them a little bit more, we might have gave them a better point to jump out on. But I wanted to get into your book a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because would you consider this to be like, is this a tell-all book? Like we getting all of the sauce and all of the things that nobody ever wanted you to know. You know what I'm saying, in this book, or like what's perspective are you writing it from? You think?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, no, it's not a tell-all, and I'm glad you asked me that question because I want to make sure that whoever reads this is not my opportunity to get a 10 seconds of fame and throw LeVar under the bus and throw LaMelo under the bus for any little scandalous moments that I may or may not have seen about. You're not going to get any of that with this book. There are things that I'm sure that you can speak on, that I can speak on, that we may have seen or may not have seen, or that are taking place that we can always put out to the masses, to get a couple extra clicks. But I've always been big on relationships, and I'm not going to ruin a relationship, by revealing something that just that sounds salacious just for the sake of doing that. So that's not going to be in the book. However, what is going to be in the book are things that did transpire from my perspective that I thought added nuance for someone who wasn't really necessarily in the room, so that you can kind of get an understanding as to what I went through. And then from a broader perspective of what we all went through, so that even if you're like, oh, well, I didn't know Fresh went through that, but I do remember that situation or something like that happened, or I remember where I was at when he was talking about that. I talked about a time in the book where like I was literally on the verge of saying, screw all this, send me home. And I know you probably remember some of that, but it was the time when we were in DC. I was on a phone call with Alan and Brianna. And I was almost depending on how that phone call went, like, and how the phone call started to feel like it was going, like I was about to just tell them, hey, y'all, just put me on the plane and send me back home. But there were moments like that took place that I wanted to at least share so y'all can see, like, this was not an easy thing to do. Like, we weren't just out here just, having the time of our lives with the Ball family and traveling all over. Like, this was a real struggle to put together. This was, me specifically, wearing multiple hats, not just two. It was 3, 4, 5, and 6 different hats. You had multiple hats. All of us had multiple hats because we were doing this on a limited budget. We were doing it with a short amount of time. So there was a lot of stress, a lot of tension that took place because that's just natural. That's natural to experience when you're doing something of this magnitude, and you're doing something that, I'll be honest, a lot of it I didn't even know what I was doing. Like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. It was like, well, do you feel like, and he was like, well, no disrespect, but do you feel like, you probably weren't even qualified for something? I was like, yeah, I've never done PR for nobody. Like, I didn't even know how to do PR. I never did any sort of in-game broadcasting. Now, I thought that we eventually did a pretty good job, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was just there just talking. So when they put, and I know I joke about it all the time, like, I cringe watching some of the stuff when they put us in front of the camera. You know what I'm talking about? When they put us in front of the camera, like those first like 4 or 5 games, especially that first game, it's hard for me to even watch it because I'm like, Brandon, man, this is horrible. This is beyond horrible. But we didn't know what we were doing, but that adds to the story. That adds to when you watch from game 1 to the last game of the season, you're like, hey man, who are these guys? They may not be, Stephen A. Smith and Jeff Van Gundy or whatever out there, or Mark Jackson, Jeff Van Gundy out there, but they can hold their own. Like they actually look and sound like they know what they're doing. But when you've caught 60 plus games, I mean, at some point you're gonna figure it out. Kind of like on the job training. So, but that's the lens that I wanted to come from. I wanted to be able to tell, how things were for me, but also again paint a broad brush to kind of, share what it could have been like for everybody else. Even though all of us have our own, journey and story, but it does provide. Okay, if it was like this for Brandon, I can imagine how it was like for AB. I can imagine what it was like for Brianna, for Alan, for Drea, for B Jones, or whomever. It was just a lot that was going on. In such a short period of time. It was only 2 to 3 months time period, but we got it done.
Yeah. I It's so funny, man, because when you talk about the first time broadcasting and a lot of the first of that trip was it. I look at some of that stuff and I would struggle back then to go back and watch it in the moment. You know what I mean? But when I go back now and I see it, I end up I'm so proud of us in general because I know that we had no experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I remember the first game.
Right.
I remember talking with Alan ahead of time. I'm like, bro, how do you want this to look? You know what I mean? Like, cause we could go in there and try to imitate some of these NBA broadcasters or whatnot. And I could go and research and try to be like, hello, welcome to, or we could do something fresh and different and like just come in there and be a version of ourselves that we wanted to show. And I feel like I remember him being like, I mean, you do what you want to do. Like, if it's dope, it's because you made it dope, and if it's trash, it's on you. That is trash. And I feel like we did something that was cool enough where people like really took to it. You know what I mean? Even the different catchphrases and back and forth. I still see people to this day, or people hit me up and be like, "Man, they stealing your lingo." You know what I'm saying? Or, oh, throw the fire emojis in the chat. Do this and where you tapped in from. You know what I mean? That like, those are things that even when I just watch people live stream today, they have those elements that I don't know if they was there before we added that to the culture, you know? So I am proud of what we created. And even the funny moments, I like every couple of years, I say it like it was 2018 this was, so I guess it's a while ago when you really think about it. But the clip where we were in Chicago and they start rolling and we not even paying attention, and you like tapping me and all that like pop back up on my timeline, and I like die laughing every time I see that clip. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, man. Like, going back to what you said about Allen, I think it's important for me to say this because there's some parts in the book where he's heavily featured. And if you read it, you might, it might come off like he's being painted, in a bad light. And that's your point. That's your point of view of how you read it. However, there were some things that I strongly disagree with coming from him. But I made it I wanted to make sure that I did acknowledge, I wouldn't even be in the JBA or part of, Big Baller Brand family if it wasn't for him. And you brought up a really good point about the freedom that he gave us to be able to even do what we did in those live streams and those broadcasts and whatnot. And I even mentioned this, that, I think it was helpful to get validation from him. Because I mean, he would tell me so many times, man, y'all killing the game, man, y'all killing it, man. Because even though we may have sucked like in front of the camera, like before the game, to start off, like I thought early on, like we had such a good vibe and good chemistry, like while the game was going on, like it started to flow really well. Like you said, the catchphrases from you, the pulling the chicken out of the oven, the nicknames that I was coming up with, like we had such a natural chemistry and vibe that even if we sometimes didn't sound like an official broadcasting duo, I think people just rocked with the vibe that we were trying to create, and it was so organic. It was just so like non-scripted. Like we tried to like do like for those who don't know, we tried to do like simulated games, like AB and I, we would meet like YouTube a game and like try to call it, but a lot of what you saw, like it was really just us, just the times that we spent around each other and the conversations that we would have, we just kind of just let that carry over to the live stream, without really we had no rehearsal. There was no, hey y'all, let's put a camera on y'all and let's run through a script real quick. We had none of that. And to get that validation from Allen that, first of all, do whatever y'all feel works. And then for him to come back on the back end and be like, hey, that's dope, man. Y'all, this is, yes, we rocking with this. Me and LeVar, like, we like this. Like, that helped propel me to continue on and to continue to put 110%, not just in that, but into everything that I was doing, because it was like, okay, we've arrived, we're official. And there really wasn't no turning back at that.
I agree. It was just that validation from Allen and LeVar for me was a big thing, because during that leg we ran into LeVar every now and again. We didn't spend a ton of time with him, and I don't even think like in some of the day-to-day moments we were conversating with him. But when you did see him in the arena, or you did see him and he was like, oh, all right, okay, I remember, I feel like there was some point like he kind of like was like, at first I ain't know, I was listening like, what the hell is going on? And then all of a sudden I was like, well, all right, hold on, I see what, you know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of folks had that same thing of like, oh Lord, they it's fit to go left, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, actually no, this is kind of some of the dopest stuff that we done seen happen. That's how I look at it though. In my head, it was a dope, one of the dopest commentary ever that happened in sports history. Can you do this for me though? Like, all right, so you in the
Fact.
book, could you give, you kind of feel like you touched on a few moments that you describe in this book, but what is something that you touch on here that like folks don't know and like would be the selling point? Like here's the type of the stuff we get into on this that you probably didn't know, but like was behind the scenes and like made this thing what it was.
Yeah, good question. I feel like there's quite a few of those in the book. I won't give like major detail, but I will say there was a moment that transpired during the season, when because it's public now. People know that there were players that got cut, right? There were players that started off with us that we went through training camp with, and then all of a sudden, they were kind of here today, going tomorrow type situation. But there was a player that I became really fond of, like very fond of, and there was a moment that happened the night before the game that he was having a really, really hard time, just an extremely emotional hard time with the fact that he was about to be sent home. And I mentioned that part in the book. I detailed it very, very much, and you were right there, so you know pretty much what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that was one of the moments where it really hit, and it really hit hard. There were other moments because that person wasn't the only player that got sent home, because the season had already started. This was probably one of the first moments when the season had already started. We started playing games, and it was like, all right, peace, I'm about to go, and we're about to bring somebody that's better than you. And that I thought we were done with the cuts and the waving of the players in training camp. And then when this happened, and the fact that I really liked this guy a whole lot, it hurt to my core. And the thing that hurt the most was watching his response to it. It was almost as if he felt like he didn't have anything to go back to, or what he was going back to was going to be his detriment. And you could feel it, you could obviously see it and hear it for those who were there, exactly how he was responding. But that's probably one of the moments that I feel like people they didn't know really what happened behind the scenes. And if you get the book and you read it, and you like you're like, oh wow, like that's crazy, like that's a made for TV drama filled climactic type moment, in and of itself. So that's probably something I would like for people to know about, that there were people that were affected, not just the players, but staff members, and everybody. A lot of lives were impacted, in some kind of way. And it was a real league. It was a real professional league. At least that we tried to model it like that. So if you didn't do your job, then you were cut. You got paid and you were expected to perform. And if you didn't perform, if you had a disciplinary issue, then that was grounds for being waived. And all of that was not something that I think I was prepared for when I first took on being a part of the league. I thought it was more of a developmental thing. Oh, they got 2 years, but I learned really quickly that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I would say I had similar experience. I remember, and well, let me say this. I remember the moment that you're talking about and how like chaotic that felt in the moment and like how real it was for everybody involved in watching the people who were trying to convince him that it was his time to go home, and then him trying to convince them like I ain't going home today. You know what I mean? And I do think like the situation probably ended up resolving itself the best way that it could have. You know what I mean? It was almost like a fairy tale moment. My man played the next game and started knocking down threes, and then you know what I mean. But end up still going home. But it was one of them tear jerking moments, and I feel like even for me, after the fact, we go back to the room, and it's like, dang, like, is this too real for me? You know what I mean? Like, watching these dudes have to go home and not give up, have their dream, I would say, ripped away from them, like, because you get selected to be a part of this. It's supposed to be a true fairy tale ending for everybody, and for some folks, it didn't happen like that. So that was tough. And I'll say I remember when I kind of realized that, yo, this is serious. Like I kind of thought maybe like this would be a great opportunity, but it would be, you ever watch like The Real World or the Road Rules Challenge, where you make the show and like you're here and we're gonna rock with you to the end, like the cast is the cast type of situation. And I didn't realize that we would even be cutting people in camp until I'm in the hotel and I'm like having a good day. I'm like chuckling, laughing, coming through, and I'm watching this kid and he like is in tears, like sad. And I'm like, bro, why you sad? We in LA, we in Cali right now. You just made the JBA league. You about to, and I'm looking and nothing I'm saying is cheering him up. And I look over and he got his big ass suitcase sitting next to him, waiting on his ride to go home. And I'm like, well, you going home? Why you going home? And they like, oh, I got cut. And I didn't even realize that we would even be doing that to folks. And I don't think that a lot of people realized that we would be doing that either. And for me, it kind of said two different things. It made me realize how serious they were taking this, where we're just not going to have anybody on the court. If we don't think you can play, like, you're going to go home. You know what I mean? So, like, the level of basketball that they wanted to see was probably greater than most people expected them to be expecting from these players. But then also, like, it made it real of, like, damn, like, this is, like, crushing some of these kids. You know what I mean? And their feelings in that moment. So I don't know. That was tough, man. I still remember that. I'm like, golly, that sucked. But as I go through here and to this same point, I go through and I'm looking at the chapters for each one of these for the book. And I read the chapter and I love how you like label these things. Cause for me, as soon as I read it, I'm like, damn, I know exactly what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? And it is like jogging my memory on that. So I'm excited to delve into this book and then read it a little bit more myself.
Yeah, and let me touch on and expound a little bit more about what you just said. About the not having the expectation going into it of what it really was, but also kind of as tough as it was watching those players leave, having the appreciation, whether it was how they went about it, may or may not have been a little bit better, but appreciating the fact that okay, you want to put the best product on the floor. And that's not any disrespect to some of those players, but there's, if we're trying to be game changers and we're trying to be, taken seriously, you want to make sure that you're doing right by everybody involved, all the players that are on each team, the coaches who sacrificed an entire summer away from their families and everything. They want to be able to feel like they have an opportunity to compete. And the truth was that a lot of those players, the ones who did get sent home for, reasons for not just being, basically for basketball reasons, there was a reason for that. And the idea was to bring in, a little bit better talent, which we did. So you saw, early on, you saw say, well, what would you compare the level to? They were always asking, what is it D1, D2, or whatever? It was early on, probably teetering on like, very good D3 to really good D2, somewhere in a good mixture. But after training camp, we start adding more those, players. It was more like high level D2 to mid major D1. Like we had, a really good mix of players to where you could say, hey, like these guys can really play. And there was a very select few, probably a good solid 15 or 20 that I feel comfortable putting them in any D1 program, and they would be just fine. Now you obviously can't say that about everybody, but I do appreciate the powers that be, that were making those decisions for seeing the problem, rectifying the problem. I personally would have just liked to have a heads up to know that this was exactly that this could be a possibility. I think that it would have been a lot easier to muster and swallow, seeing some of these kids that you really grew to be fond of and have a relationship with. But that's what a lot of these guys experience in these leagues. I was watching a documentary or something. It's like or interview the other day, and it's like, man, like what helped me kind of really understand that this is a business, and I'm not in college anymore. Is like I go to training camp and I get real close with somebody for like a month or 2 months, and then all of a sudden he gets cut or gets traded. I'm like, well, dang, like I just vibe with this guy for like every single day for hours at a time. Like we got really close, and he's off or clear across the country. And that's not just players. That's people in the front office that, or the people that are in the staff, the little manager type people, the maintenance people that you see all the time. You get close to them, and then they're not going. So that was probably the hardest part. But I understand why they did it. I'm thankful that they did it because it did make the games a lot easier to watch and also commentate as well.
I do think it raised the level of play a tremendous amount, and then it was nice to see. One of the things I love about basketball is it don't take you a long time to see a basketball player on court to realize why they on the court. You know what I mean? Like whether that's the way they move and athleticism, the way that they shoot, right, rebound. So I think once you started seeing some of these new cats hoop, it's like, oh, I see why they brought you in here. You know what I mean? And so I appreciated it too. But yeah, definitely a time that I'm glad you took the time to document in your book. I got you. Let me see right here. My man here, it's like you letting the hair grow out a decent amount as well these days. You know what I'm saying? Is this one of them? Were you like, yo, I ain't cutting my hair until I finish this book?
Trim up just a little bit.
Yeah. But so this is you.
Nah. I've been growing out for a minute. I've been growing out for like 3 years. So about 3 some years, and I was actually hoping to try to get it braided again. But the book came, and I was like, man, I need to go ahead and at least make a post about it. And I still ain't got it braided, but I trimmed it up a little bit at the top. And you got my edges looking all crazy right now, but it's all good.
Nah, you good, man. You good. So I saw that you're offering, if you buy it from your website here, you get the signed copy and all of that jazz.
Correct. Yeah. So if you buy it there, then you get that's it. that's my site. So, I'll have the books that I have, in hand. And then I can sign that and share one. If you want it quicker, you want the ebook version or the paperback from Amazon that you can get, like if the Amazon Prime might come the same day or the next day, then you get Amazon. But obviously they're going to take a royalty percentage and all that. So it just all depends on your preference. If you want to support me more financially and you want me to be able to sign it, order through my site, BrandonWilliamsAuthor.com. Or just you want to get it quick, or you're more of a online reader, you're not really don't care about the paperback, you just want to get the ebook. Either however you choose to support is perfectly fine with me. I'm just thankful and grateful and blessed and honored that anybody would want to read anything that I write and listen to my story and our story really and learn something new and just kind of keep it going, man. I have a huge passion. It's a huge part of my life, and I loved every bit of it, even the struggles and the stressful parts of it. It just kind of helped make and shape a lot of who I am and what I aspire to continue to do. And again, hopefully somebody can get something from it.
Nah, that's great, man. That's great. Also, Amazon best-selling author right now, right? From this book, you was one of you at least got that accomplishment out of this bad boy as well, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thankful to everybody who pre-ordered it because it really officially released yesterday. So we're still really early on in the whole process, but the pre-orders did really well. So I was able to get on Amazon bestseller new release category, and just really looking forward, like I said, just continue to keep it going, man. So those of y'all watching, please, the links that AB puts in the description, whichever one is most appealing to you, I'll be more than happy to get your support. Grateful, honored, all the other adjectives to have your support, but it's definitely needed and appreciated. And we just want to continue to get this thing going, man. I don't want all of our efforts to be in vain. Really want the JBA's name to continue to thrive and to be mentioned in professional basketball history.
I appreciate you, man, for coming on the podcast, man. The first guest. And working through it, and we try to do this. I think last week we were talking about it and all that stuff and timing and all that jazz. That's what everybody say. It was like, man, I was trying to bend in the timing. We got it right though. And so I appreciate you doing this. We'll get this bad boy posted, and because I think I'm happy that you shared that story, but then also I'm happy we get an opportunity to help you share that story as well. And it's deep, man. And you are somebody who I always appreciate because you always moving and hustling and taking it to the next level. And so I got so much footage from that time. I'm like, dang, I gotta do something with it too, and keep pushing that the culture and that narrative story and forward from the JBA. So hopefully I come out with something as well.
We need the documentary, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I would love to do that, man. I would love to do that. So we'll see, man. But any final words or that you want to lead the people with, man, go ahead and do that, and we're gonna get up out of here.
Yeah, man. First of all, let me give a shout out to LeVar, Allen. Just the two people who spearheaded everything. Allowed me to be a part of the JBA Big Baller Brand family. Shout out to, and I put a lot of these in the book, but definitely want to at least get the core members. Shout out to Brianna, Drea. Two people that don't really get, or you probably won't never really hear about, but they were right there every step of the way. With the planning process and really getting everything going. We couldn't have done this without them. So many other people, I'm not going to mention everybody because I'm going to lose somebody. All the players, all the coaches, and then last but not least, of course, my main man, AB the Hero. Truth be told, I really would not have gotten an opportunity without AB. Allen and LeVar were the ones who, approved everything, obviously, and said, yeah, sure, of course. AB was the one that looked out, because they reached out to him first, and they asked, hey, who else should we be talking to, and he, without really even knowing me, mentioned my name, and they kind of knew who I was a little bit, but he threw the bone out, shot me Allen's number. And then we were able to talk a little bit, and then I made the decision to drive to Atlanta to meet them in person. But AB was the one that spearheaded a lot of this. So I'm indebted to you. This whole process, this whole book, none of this really happens, without your blessing, with kind of putting me on, or at least the referral, and to really make me believe that it's a possibility that these people will want to even work with me. You gave me the confidence and the courage to drive to Atlanta, to meet Allen face to face, and I was able to sell myself from there. But you gave me the confidence to want to do that, and without that, I can't confidently say that I would have been your co broadcaster, and been able to set and make history with you. So. For that, I'm always going to continue to be indebted to you, and very gracious and thankful, for your friendship and everything else that we've always shared for the past 5+ years.
Yeah, straight up, man. I appreciate you being able to do what you did, and putting it together, and also making me look good in that situation. There are times where I have there are people in there who they were like, yo, could you make the connection with? And they went left, you know what I'm saying? And so folks was looking at me like, yo, did you invite him over here? And I was like, no, I told y'all he was crazy. And so, you know what I'm saying? You came through and like you said, sold yourself and brought your skill set to the table and wore so many hats. And so it made both of us look good in those moments. You know what I mean? So that's dope, man. And I appreciate you pulling up here, sharing your story with the channel, and being the first guest on the pod, man. So I want to say thank you again, man. We're gonna shut this thing out, man. Once again, it's your main man, AB the Hero. This is the Future of Sports podcast. Like, share, listen everywhere you get your podcasts and all of that stuff. We're going to bring some interesting people to you with interesting stories, and trust that it's going to get better with time. So we're going to get up out of here. Shemaine, man, AB the Hero, we out. Peace.